Okay. So a couple of things that I wanted to go through with you is, in essence, I wanted to share just a couple of really kind of three different things. Two of them will be really fast, and the third one probably won't be a ton of time either. But anyway, three things that I wanted to share with you. First thing is, if you saw in the division newsletter, they talked about that on June 19th there were changes approved to the real estate purchase contract. Now, I don't know what those changes are that have been approved. I don't think they have released that yet. But the point being that the commission approved some changes to the real estate purchase contract. So that has now been sent to the Attorney General to get approval from the Attorney General. Once the Attorney General approves those changes, then they will release a new real estate purchase contract. And again, like I said, I don't know what changes, so I don't know how drastic, if much, of changes will take place with that. But just something to look forward to. The last time the real estate purchase contract was updated was 2017, so it's been 7 years. And so it probably is time for a few updates and things. So something to look forward to once they get that approved. We'll let you know, and we'll figure out what the differences are, and we'll do some classes on it that way. So that's first thing. Second thing that I wanted to talk about, again, out of the newsletter, they talked about that Realms is going to be going away, and they're replacing that with a system that's going to be called My License One, which I don't really know. Of course, Realms doesn't, I mean, I guess sort of makes sense. But anyway, so My License One is going to take the place of Realms. That website apparently is already up and functioning for a few things, and they're just slowly migrating things over there. So just something to be aware of, that down the road, as you go in to make changes and things, it will be transitioning out of Realms and over to the My License One website is where that stuff will take place. So anyway, that was the second thing to talk to you about. Third is, I just thought I'd go through and talk about some of the violations that were cited within the newsletter from the division, and things that you need to be aware of to make sure that you're not having any issues with. Jason and I taught the mandatory residential class this week, and one of the questions that we always talk about in that mandatory residential class is the number one complaint that the division receives. And the answer to that is advertising. So it's complaints and things about advertising. So I'm going to share with you the fines. So really, I'm going to just only go through and talk about the ones where agents got fined. But out of all of the violations that were in there where an agent got fined, so there were 6 fines that were issued in the division's newsletter, and 5 out of the 6 had to do with advertising. So anyway, just something important to remember. So the first one was the one that wasn't about advertising, I guess, is how I would say it, was an agent who had listed a property. They said that they were the owner on the property, and a buyer wrote the offer. They got it accepted, and then they had advertised that they would accept FHA financing. The buyer was getting FHA financing. And then when they did the preliminary title report, the buyer noticed, hey, the agent who said that they were the owner of the property isn't listed as the owner of the property. So they called up the agent and said, hey, it said you were listed as the owner, and we don't see you on there. The next day, he got a quitclaim deed, filed to transfer the property into his name. Well, because it was an FHA property, then as you're aware, there's a 90-day time frame in which you can't transfer the property. So they filed a complaint to the division. The division researched it, came back, and they actually fined that agent $4,000 and said they had to do 9 hours of continuing education before their additional, in addition to the 18. So anyway, just something to keep in mind on those. Make sure that you're advertising things as the truth. Don't be, marketing things that aren't true. So because you got a $4,000 fine due to that. All right. The other ones that are more relevant to what things that are important for you to remember is in terms of the advertising. So on 3 of the violations that were in the newsletter regarding advertising, 3 of them were people who had advertised something on social media. And after advertising on social media, or as part of advertising on social media, they did not include the name of the brokerage. So they didn't include that they were an agent and the name of the brokerage. So just a reminder, anytime that you're doing any advertising anywhere, you have to put the name of the brokerage on there. And it needs to, the only time that would not apply is if there was no possible way, which I believe right now there pretty much always is a way for you to put the name of the brokerage on social media. But just keep in mind 3 violations for people who had done advertising on social media and did not include the name of the brokerage on there. And so the brokerage name has to be a reasonable size, is how they say it, compared to your name. So in terms of you putting the name of the brokerage out there, or you doing any advertising, it's the name of the brokerage has to be in a reasonable size. And it used to be that it had to be 50% of what the licensees, the font that the licensee's name was in, but now it just says reasonable. So I would stick with that 50% piece of it. But really, more than anything, just anything you're doing on social media, make sure that you're advertising the name of the brokerage, because 3 fines, all for $500. Okay. So the other 2 that I want to talk about, one was an agent that had gone out and advertised a property that was not their own listing. And so on this one, the agent got fined $1,000. So let me share my screen and show you in the administrative rules where it talks about that. So let me find, if I can find it on my screen here to share it. Here we go. Okay, so you should be able to see this. So anytime that you are going to do any type of advertising and it is not your listing, so it's talked about right here in this section of the code, that an individual licensee may not advertise or offer to sell or lease property without the written consent of the owners of the property, and then the key word here being and if the property is currently listed, the listing broker. So just keep in mind, anytime you're going to advertise any property, you have to have the owner's permission. And if it is currently listed, you've got to have the authorization from the listing broker as well. So on the scenario that I'm talking about right now, the agent had advertised a property and did not get permission from the seller, and it does have to be written authorization from the seller. So it's kind of a little bit of a sticky scenario, I guess, is what I would say in terms of that, because if the property is listed, you should not be calling the listing agent, or excuse me, the seller. You should be calling the listing agent. If a property is listed, you shouldn't be calling the seller to say, hey, can I advertise your property? We've got to go through the listing agent. And what I would say is make sure that you are getting written consent, which again, I guess I should have not quit sharing that just yet, because I want to make sure you see where it says that. So right here, it does say advertise or offer to sell or lease property without the written consent of the owners and the listing agent, or broker, sorry, if it's listed. So what we want to do, just to make sure you're protected on that, is call the listing agent and say, hey, I would like to advertise your seller's property, and is that going to be okay? Can you get me something in writing from the seller saying that it's okay to do that? So on that one, the agent was fined $1,000 for advertising a property without getting the written authorization from the seller. And then, like I say, if it is listed, from the listing broker as well. So that was one. The last one in terms of these violations was an agent that sent out and did a marketing piece that they wanted to buy a home. So if you are going to do any type of an advertising, which again, in this one, the agent sent out a marketing piece, just canvassed a neighborhood and mailed out some marketing things saying, I would like to buy your home. I don't know exactly what it said, but basically, I buy houses, I want to buy your house or whatever. And the agent failed to put on there that they were an agent and the broker that they are associated with. And so Jason and we were talking about this morning, because for me, I kind of felt like when I read that, I thought, man, without reading that, I would have thought if I was just wanting to buy somebody's house and I were to just do a marketing piece saying, hey, I want to buy a home, you would think you could just put together a marketing piece and then mail that out, because it's me wanting to buy it. I'm not saying I have a buyer. I'm saying I want to buy it. And as Jason and I were talking about it, he said, well, if you were going to sell your property and do a for sale by owner, you still have to, or even not even for sale by owner, but if you're listing your property, you've got to put owner agent on there. You've got to disclose that you're an agent. So it would make sense that if you are going to buy a property, you have to disclose, obviously. If you were just buying one that was listed, you would use that disclosure of interest to disclose you are an agent. So in any marketing that you are going to do, you would also need to include that you're an agent and include the name of the brokerage. So the interesting thing on that one is those social media posts, the agents were fined $500 because they didn't list the brokerage that they were with. This one, he was fined $1,000. And I'm assuming the reason it was double is because not only did he not put the name of the brokerage, he did not put that he was a licensed real estate agent. So just keep in mind, any marketing that you're doing, even if you were going to go out to market to say, hey, I want to buy a house and I'm looking to purchase it myself, you still need to disclose that you're an agent, and you still need to disclose the brokerage that you're with. And without doing that, you run the risk of receiving that $1,000 fine instead of just and I'd say but the $500 that the other people were. So just again, remember, you have to have written authorization from the seller to advertise a property. And if it's listed, you also need to get authorization from the listing broker as well. So anyway, kind of a short one today, but what thoughts or questions, comments do you guys have on any of that or anything else? Sure.
So concerning my own rentals and tenant contracts, I've always done that on any advertising, but on the contract itself, I don't have to do that, do I?
I would say you do need to. Yeah, that you would need to disclose that you're an agent.
I actually have I've disclosed that I'm an agent, and on the main contract, Century 21, I guess I'm covered because the main contract adds all the addenda, but I didn't do it on the addenda.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think you're probably good with just as long as you've disclosed that you're an agent, because on that contract, we're not talking advertising now. Just in terms of advertising is where you've got to make sure
you're really not part of this contract. So I've had a question whether I should have put that. I just put the Century 21 logo. That's all I did, but it's large.
Yeah, I would just say there shouldn't, on a rental that is your own like that, you should not
really
have
shouldn't.
It shouldn't appear that Century 21 is part of it. Yeah, but you do need to disclose that you're an agent. Correct.
So I put lines through it, like, it just the way I did the thing, it accidentally put some clear lines, so it broke up the logo, and I was just going to take it off, and I didn't know either way, and I thought, well, I'll ask this question and then I'll just leave it as it is until I find the answer, and then I forgot about it. So you're
Yeah.
saying what I thought, that Century 21 isn't part of that contract, that they should, I just have to disclose that I'm an agent.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
Overthinking things, but with the new changes coming up where we have to have a buyer broker sign before we go out and show property, how does that affect open houses or a sign call, that type of thing?
Yeah, good question. So, in terms of open houses, sign calls, all that kind of stuff, you do not need to have that. And let me actually even just specify a little, because in the division's newsletter they talk about the NAR settlement, and one of the things in the division wanted to clarify is this agreement that NAR made is an agreement with the people who filed this lawsuit, and so this is not. This is an NAR rule. This is not a law that we have to get the buyer broker and things signed before you show them a property. So that's now an NAR rule. So think of it as NAR is going to be the governing body on that piece of it. The state has always said you have to get a buyer broker signed, and as soon as you can get it signed is the best. But at a minimum, it has to be done before drafting an offer. So kind of keep that piece in mind, the separation of those two things. But in terms of that, so we want to do it, and let's use that to some extent to our advantage, that, hey, we are now required because of a lawsuit to get this signed. But in terms of open houses, so let me go back to that. In terms of open houses, you do not need to get a buyer broker signed for somebody walking through the open house. And part of that is when somebody comes to an open house, you are there as a representative and agent of the seller. You're not there to show them as a buyer's agent per se the property. Now, hopefully you get them as a client afterwards, and you would end up doing that. But yeah, so as far as if you get a sign call before then going and showing, if you're showing your own listing and you're acting as the listing agent only, would be fine, no different than the open house. But yeah, if you're going to go show them other houses, then according to this rule, you would need to have some type of an agreement signed with them. So hopefully, did that answer the question?
Yeah, it just, like I said, I was overthinking all of it, just trying to prepare for the what ifs. And that just came up in my brain like, well, does that mean all people that you show houses to before you show them? I've always done that anyways if I'm going to take on a new client, but just was curious. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And really, like I said, not a whole lot is changing for us here in Utah because we've already been using buyer brokers and things. It's just we probably should get them signed a little sooner potentially for some agents, but that's about it. So go ahead, Jeanette. I can see you're unmuted.
I have a question. So if we have a sign call and they want us to show the home, but we're representing the seller, so we don't have to get the buyer broker agreement. But do we have to have them sign the unrepresented buyer agreement, that little form, or not?
Well, no, you wouldn't. So again, I think the showing the house, it depends on if you're showing it, like I said, as a representative, as the listing agent, then I would say you should be making sure you're letting them know, I'm here acting as the listing agent. I represent the seller only. But if you are going to try to capture them as a client, then I would say, and use this to some extent to your advantage of, hey, yeah, you want to see my house, this listing that I've got, I'll be glad to show it to you. NAR is now requiring that we get an agreement signed that before showing property. So I'm going to need you to sign this. And yeah, if you can get them to sign it to be your agent and signing the buyer broker, that's awesome. But if not, then yeah, I think you would just want to make sure you're telling them that you represent the seller only in showing them the property, just similar to an open house.
I have a question, Russ, on the social media.
Sure.
Because I post a lot on Instagram, real estate related items, right? And my handle is Julie Newey _ realtor. So they know I'm a realtor, but I don't put Century 21 on it every time. am I supposed to do that?
Yes. Yep. Anywhere
Okay.
that you're putting it, you should have Century 21 Everest listed there.
Okay.
So, yep, great question. Any other questions? And while you're thinking, if you do have some, just kind of as an update with this settlement, that NAR settlement, we have planned, we're kind of just waiting to get all the forms and stuff that the UAR and the Salt Lake Board and the MLS are working on and putting together. So we will continue and we'll ramp up talking about that more and more the closer we get. In fact, we just scheduled this morning on August 14th, Jason and I will be doing the base camp where we'll really make sure everything's ready there and you guys understand. Not a lot has changed really for us, meaning the biggest thing we're going to be dealing with is just the commission side, because we're already been doing buyer brokers and you guys have already been doing them according to the law, meaning getting them signed before writing it and drafting an offer. Just the small little change is going to be now this NAR rule of making sure that we are, getting it before showing homes. But as far as the state's concerned and you getting fined by the state, it's just before drafting an offer. So again, it's that distinction between an NAR policing versus the Division of Real Estate Policing. And it is agreement. I mean, again, NAR, I guess, if you don't do it, could come back and kick you out of, suspend your membership for being a realtor. But it's not like you're going to get fined by the division for showing a house without getting it signed. Hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying. So we still need to do it, but it's not like you're going to get fined by the division if you're not doing it. So we'll continue to talk more about it. We'll get more information and really make sure you guys are prepared and ready. Just kind of waiting to see the forms so that we can know what we need to teach you about the changes in the forms. So anyway, any other questions, thoughts, or comments? All right. Well, hey, thank you all for spending some time with me. I really appreciate, and Jason does too. I know that you guys jumping on and taking time each week with this. So if you have anything, need anything in the meantime, you can let us know and we'll talk to you later, unless you got something else. I see some unmutes.
Thank you. Just
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks
Cool.
as always,
Appreciate
Russ,
it.
very much. Appreciate all the updates always. It's great. Thanks so much.
Okay, cool. Thanks for being here, guys. See ya.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.